Hello and welcome to The Current Thing with me, Nick Dixon. Or we're calling it The Current Thing for now. We're not really sure what it's called. It might be called Dixon Cox because this is the topical edition that I do with Paul Cox, star of GB News. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm good, thanks, Nick. I am good. It's Wednesday. Irrelevant. Doesn't matter, does it?
You said today and then just bottled it immediately. You're like, what do people say in the world of professional broadcasting? It's Wednesday. I'm here. I'm a human adult male.
What more do you want from me? The time is the afternoon, and it's Wednesday. I'm
Yeah, we're
alive.
releasing it at a different time anyway because it's not live, so you didn't even
Yeah.
need to
So
say
yeah.
that.
Sorry.
Failed at the first hurdle. I don't know what to call it, Paul. So I was calling it. I've got The Current Thing, which is the interview
You
podcast,
do.
and this is just being released under the same banner for now because it saves a lot of admin. But it's also called Dixon Cox. But people misinterpret it. I meant DIX and COX. People interpret it to mean DIXON Cox, which I accept also works. I mean, I am fine with either. But there was some debate whether it was Dixon Cox or Dix and Cox. You see what I'm saying?
Dix on Cox is
Yeah.
a dangerous mistake that could be made.
There's the whole. You could argue the whole title is flawed and dangerous.
I mean, let's face it, it is the people's favourite. But the reason it is because it's just double entendre. It's
Yeah,
British bawdy humour, isn't it? It's
that's all
Greg
it is.
Wallace.
Someone said they liked that it with the unashamedly laddish quality of it. I don't know if they meant the title or the whole show. I think both. And
There's
that's what we
got to
are,
be the
Paul.
title.
We're bringing back the lads.
We're 30 years late on lad culture.
Yeah, bringing back the men behaving badly culture. That was a great era. I think lad humor could come back, couldn't it? With Trump in the White House, Jeremy Clarkson in the
A lot of
as a
equality
PM.
about that era as well, because of course it was the ladettes and the lads. Everybody was involved.
Yeah. Women were like, what can our thing be? Oh, the same.
Yeah.
We just can drink slightly less, but we also drink and fight. But
I mean,
and just
who
stick
was
an
involved
et
in it?
on the
Like
end.
Zoe Ball, who's like a
Zoe Ball.
mainstream breakfast radio DJ. There'll be kids now thinking Zoe Ball, is she not that old lady that new does the breakfast show on BBC Radio 2? It's like, well, she's not old, and she was also a ladette, which meant that she drank lager and
Yeah.
played with boys.
I like that you're like, she's not old, because that would mean I'm old, but you're like, one, mate, she's not old. Right, number one. Number two, don't insult her like that. And number two, the thing is, actually, it's true. When you try and think of the ladette movement, literally the only person you can think of is Zoe Ball. Then it just ends. Right? You might go Sarah Cox or something,
Yeah,
but then
maybe
you're just
Denise
word
Van
associating
Outen.
because she's a Denise Van Outen. Yeah, maybe you go Denise Van Outen. I don't even know if Sarah Cox counts if she's just another DJ. There's a whole section. Our Zoomer audience is just glazing over now because they have short
Yeah,
attention
sorry,
spans
guys.
anyway, and we're talking about
Yeah,
90s ladette icons. It's a sort of a short-lived movement, and the lads movement, Men Behaving Badly, Baddiel and Skinner, probably
Game
Toby
On. Do you
Young.
remember Game On?
Yeah, I do remember
Like
Game On, a sort of
yeah,
mediocre sitcom.
yeah, where you had one flatmate who was kind of thought he was extroverted, but essentially was too scared to go out. An attractive lady flatmate, absolute requirement of any '90s sitcom, and then a geeky one who everyone kind of liked and had
Yeah,
ginger hair,
and it had a great
compulsory.
soundtrack. Where I Find My Heaven. I just remembered by the Gigolo Ants. The 90s was a different era. That's
Yeah,
so funny. I erased the woman from my mind. I couldn't remember who she was, but you're right. Game On.
the
3
flat share
seasons.
situation.
I'm amazed that got 3 seasons. That's a one season podcast if ever I saw it. Oh, Samantha Womack, was it?
Yeah, she
Wow.
went on to do. She was in East. May even still be in EastEnders, but went on to do.
I knew it was Ben Chaplin because I met him because came into the bookshop where I used to work. All the famous people used to come in. I could tell he was a decent bloke because we made him sign. We had this ridiculous quill pen that was like a sort of joke pen, and the guy just handed him that because right when he had to sign his signature, and he went, I just signed it Shakespeare," that's pretty funny actually. And he was a good guy. Well, you'd be able to tell what people were like by how they were when they came in. Whereas there was another guy from another mediocre sitcom. Do you remember that sitcom? I've just completely forgotten the name. Coupling. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Coupling. And a guy came in from that, the Welsh guy from that, and he was incredibly rude. He came in. Now maybe he was having a bad day, but he came in on the phone and handed the book to us and kind of made a gesture that we should give him a discount because it was like very mildly scuffed. But while even not even looking at it, and then my colleague just looked at him and was like, what are you on about? And he went, oh, never mind. And he's like, oh, that's the height of rudeness. Whereas Ben Chaplin was the height of charm. And he was in one of my favorite movies, which is The Thin Red Line.
I
Didn't mean to talk
mean,
about any of this.
definitely we didn't, and we probably shouldn't, but we're doing it, and that's that.
We're doing it. It's a
I often
completely
wonder
different
about
podcast. No politics anymore, guys. It's lads banter. Welcome to the laddish banter between Paul and Nick. 1.5 hours of
we
laddish.
refuse to talk about anything any later than 1999,
Yeah.
when we believed all good ended.
This podcast, here's a review. 3 stars. This podcast is strange. Starts with laddish banter, like any mainstream BBC show could easily be featuring John Robbins. Then veers off strangely into far right politics. Was
Yeah.
confused. Hey, remember the ladettes? And in other news, why Reform aren't right wing enough? What? I thought this was a laddie banter show about cereals from the 90s. Remember cereal?
Yeah, you don't get them anymore. You can't put the little toys in the box, can you? Because of, I don't know, some sort of.
You don't get them anymore. You don't even know what I'm talking about. You just say you don't get that anymore. I set something up. You just say, yeah, you don't get that anymore. And we're just phoning it in. 16 years later, doing the same show. It took off. The lad banter part. We love the lad banter part, guys. Not so keen on the politics. We just want the money, so we just do a lads banter show. I just tee you up with 90. Remember the NES, Paul, and then later the Super NES? Yeah.
Yeah. Don't do that anymore. Just that'd be my catchphrase.
That's your catchphrase. Don't get that anymore. And that's all you do. And everyone goes, "Wee!" And then we play a recorded thing that just claps. Sorry, guys.
Swanee whistle.
You wouldn't get this with Toby Young. Actually, Toby was totally of that era. He was part of the lads.
Yeah, he was, wasn't he? He would have been, part of. It would probably been at Downing Street the day that Brit Pop landed in Downing Street. Although he was on the right of politics, wasn't he, Toby? So maybe he wasn't invited to New Labour parties. I don't know.
No, he'd have been at some other party down the road with his spectator mates, plotting the next
sneering
normie candidate. Plotting the next centrist liberal. Sorry, Toby, it's terrible. Now we just attack people. Let's crack on then. That's 9 minutes of banter I didn't expect, but it's about 8 minutes. That's 8 minutes. I sound like Alabama. That's 8 minutes of solid banter there. It really is good stuff. We were going to talk about Nick Candy. Nick Candy has gone to Reform. And this is a guy with a few billions. He's a rich guy. And I was just looking at this article. Nick Candy's defection proves Reform is the only party with momentum. I was thinking, oh wow, who's written that? It's Nigel Farage. He's written it himself in the Telegraph. So slightly partial that one. But if you don't know who Nick Candy is, he's a rich bloke who's married to, and I hate to just send us right back into 90s reminiscence, but he is married to Holly Valance, who was from probably our era of Neighbours, and then she had a brilliant singing career with many excellent songs, all of which I can recall, and they were great songs. And then, but she turned out to be surprisingly kind of, if not based, at least surprisingly kind of on the right. No one saw it coming. You don't really get that, do you, from many sort of pop stars?
You don't
and
know
actors.
anything about actresses like Holly Valance, from their roles in Neighbours or their bubblegum pop music album. You're not really learning a lot, are you? Yeah. But I guess marrying
not
a
lot of the inner life in the songs. Is that what you're saying, Paul?
There wasn't much gritty. It wasn't Jagged Little Pill, was it? Another 90s female gets a mention. Alanis Morissette.
Remember? Yeah, I do in fact remember that. Next
you don't
one.
Get that anymore.
No, you don't hear about that anymore. You do not hear from Alanis Morissette. Why not, Paul? Well, because that was the height of her recording career. Oh yeah, good point.
Didn't understand irony, but wrote a hell of a song.
Heck of a song, Paul. Heck of an album. You're right. So we didn't know much about Holly's inner life. Then she came out as pro-reform, which is pretty. I mean, that is pretty crazy for a pop star because it's not just like oh, this pop star seems to be slightly Christian and maybe doesn't love Kamala Harris. Like, no, I like Reform UK, and she said it when it was even a bit more edgy to say. It wasn't that edgy, but it was for a pop star. It was pretty edgy and surprising.
Yeah, every day must be like a sort of Christmas surprise for Nigel Farage these days. There's always someone coming out, isn't there? There's like Elon Musk on Monday. "Oh, we're just going to bang you 100 million quid, mate." He's like, right,
Yeah,
okay. Nick Candy comes along and says, "I'll be your treasurer." Is a 7-figure sum. Oh, by the
yeah.
way, Holly will be tagging along for the ride.
And it's
That's a
an
little
appropriate
bonus
name if
for
you
you.
were going to be someone that just hands out money to people unexpectedly. Candy's a pretty good name, isn't it?
Yeah, I think his business is called like I don't know, candy something. I don't know. There
The
you go.
Candy Man.
Start the sentence where I didn't have the did not have the actual
Requisite
end of the
knowledge.
sentence available
No.
to me or the knowledge.
Well, he's come on board and he's hinted that he thinks he can raise more than he talked about what people tend to raise for an election campaign and said, "Oh, I can raise way more than that." And he said it with such confidence, like I instantly believe him. And so that's a big thing for reform, as you say. And he's been texting Elon Musk. Musk retweeted something about it and said interesting, but he does say that quite a lot. But suddenly they do have the money, and Candy is interesting because he was backing Labour. That's quite a turnaround, isn't it? He's basically back late. He moved against the Tories because he's like, okay, they're just too incompetent for business. We'll go with Labour, which quite a few business people did.
To enforce a change, you'd probably say.
Yeah,
Well, not that you needed to, because everyone was going to win it. Well, I guess you never know, do you? It's that, it's that thing, isn't it? Maybe if you don't do it, no one else will, and you end up with the Tories again. But essentially, reading between the lines, reading what he'd written and what's been written about and what he said himself on GB News just yesterday, he he wanted to, bring about the change of government. And he went on to say it's basically been an unmitigated disaster. They know it has. We know it has. There's no secret. Labour are shit.
that's it. I mean, to back Labour and then in 5 months to switch to reform, that does show. But I've thought this for a while with Labour. There's something almost, I don't say cosmic, but you know how all of Europe is moving to the right, and that's where everything's going. And we had this kind of freak left wing government. It never really made sense to me. It was, I mean, we are somehow different. We've got all these kind of Remainer midwits, and maybe it's the reaction against Brexit. But there was something about Labour getting in, less, 20% of the nation and all that. The loveless landslide and all this. It just sort of felt strange at the time. It's like we're going against the grain of where everyone else is going. And now I know that all these countries are trying to cling on, like France, they're trying to sort of, and Germany, they're trying to sort of do everything they can, even some quite dodgy shenanigans to resist the right. But the right just seems sort of inevitable across Europe and Britain, partly because of the absurd immigration policies. But did it feel to you like we were kind of out of touch, out of step, and now it just feels like it's never taken. He's tried to rescue himself a bit with this immigration speech he made, Starmer, but to me it just felt like what I'm trying to say is Starmer never really took hold. It always felt like he was in trouble from the start, kind of like David Moyes at Man United. I mean, this is a reference that will alienate some of our listeners, but Moyes came in and it was just like, but it never really worked from the start, and he just was gone very very soon. If someone just comes in, you can just see they're wrong immediately. I just feel like that's what we've got with Starmer. To do a reset 5 months in after you've already had your budget, madness.
Also, nobody looked to see how good he would be, really. They just went, it's different to the Tories, therefore we're going to go for that. And then it just became immediately apparent. The reason it became immediately apparent is because they remained in opposition mode. Where they remain to this
Yes.
day, I watched it's as I've already said, the big news was it's Wednesday. So I watched PMQs before we jumped on this, and it's it's a game of sort of Tory bingo because what they do, they just somebody asks a question from the opposition, whatever it's about, the NHS, rail, immigration, or whatever, they give a snippet alluding to the fact they might have an answer, and then they go, "Of course, we were let down by the previous government," and you just and that I
There's a
get it,
black hole,
yeah,
22 billion.
it but there's no leadership in that. Why mention it? It's always constantly. In fact, I was watching the BBC politics program just after for whatever. I don't know what I was watching actually. I used to watch it a lot, but last
Maybe
couple of
because it's
years I
your
won't.
job to follow politics, Paul.
Yeah, but I tend to jump on jump onto GB News. But it is
Right.
that used to be my staple. The BBC was always my go-to for news, and that political program that's on every lunchtime I would always watch, and they had the Tory shadow science minister on there. Forget the name of the guy. It'll come to me in a minute. But and he wanted to talk about immigration. The first thing he was saying was, "No, the Tories failed on immigration numbers, all this sort of stuff." And basically, the pressure was put on him. Why would you want to talk about it? It was your problem. You created it. Why would you want to talk about it now? Why would you want to focus on that? And in that moment, I thought, well, his answer basically was, it's still a huge problem. We need to resolve it. What are Labour going to do about it? That's why we're talking about it. So what? So what that we had our problems. We've had our hands up now. We should have done better. That's from the Tory perspective. I think they absolutely fucked us in terms of immigration. I'd like to apologise to our American audience once again. Shit and fuck in the first half an hour. I'd like to.
No, it's terrible. And it wasn't even our American audience. It was a guy saying American podcasts are better because they don't swear. But we want to apologise to that guy again who stopped listening anyway.
Sorry. Perhaps
Paul is out of line.
What's his name?
I'm too tired to swear. I haven't woken up fully yet. But what about, you're talking about Alan Mack?
Right.
I just looked at his name. Is that it?
No.
Who cares?
No, it doesn't matter. It's not. It wasn't Alan Mack. It was like
Oh. It wasn't Alan Mack. The shadow science.
Anyway,
never mind.
I think it was a shadow science minister, but maybe it was Alan Mack. I can't remember. Anyway, the point is that he was under pressure for talking about the immigration problem because it was a Tory issue, and he's saying, well, this is the point of politics, isn't it? We all have to talk about the problems, whether we started them, created them, whatever it might be. We need to talk about it, and it just felt to me like the presenter, the left-leaning commentators on there, and of course the Labour minister that was on there, indulged in that instead of taking the lead and saying, well, this is exactly what we're going to do now, and making us believe. They've got no real policy on the NHS at the moment. They haven't told us what they're going to do with regards to the NHS. Immigration is smash the gangs, which sounds like a family game that we all play at Christmas, where they, you all sit around as a family and try and imagine the board game. You throw the dice.
Smash the gangs.
You've lost your dinghies. You now have to go back to Albania and recruit more whatever.
I could see that. That's the game. That's the board game they all think we're playing at GB News.
Yes.
Typical GB News Christmas. We're playing Smash the Gangs with our family. How many dinghies have you got left, Paul? I'm down to one dinghy, mate. I might not even get in.
You've made it to Dover. Get yourself 3 gold points.
And then you're in the country and there's no way for you to work and you have to start doing crimes. Anyway,
normally I make very salient points. This is not happening right now because I keep making myself amusing myself. But the point is, we've got this kind of we've got this uni-party mainstream blob which are solving nothing. The talking points are all the same. There's no resolution because the leadership are in opposition. The old leadership are in opposition as well. Ed Davies at Thorpe Park. The only people that are doing anything different are Reform. I assume that's where he is. Maybe Chessington.
Just such a funny, obscure reference. I mean, some people won't even get that, especially international listeners, but just throwing out Ed Davies at Thorpe Park. Just perpetually at a theme park every day, just trapped in a kind of theme park nightmare. When can I get out? But just forced to always be. I'm Ed Davey. Today I'm at Alton Towers, and I'm calling out Keir Starmer on immigration. But why are you at Alton Towers though? Wait, and he's like, as he goes down the chute, he's like, and guess how many came in net? And that was just the net figure. And he's like on the slide. And then he's talking about crime statistics and social housing and immigrants take a disproportionate amount of social, and he's like on the slide.
I'm getting housing,
and that's why I voted in favour of assisted dying. And he's on a log flume. Oh, sorry, it's just too funny. Ed Davey. Sorry for our American listeners who don't like swearing and don't know who Ed Davey is. He ran a campaign as the Liberal Democrat leader where he was just doing ridiculous hijinks the entire campaign. And most people thought, okay, that's sort of okay gimmick for campaigning. It's ridiculous, but maybe it worked. But he's carried on doing it. He keeps calling out Starmer to play him at FIFA. It's like the campaign's over, Ed. Go back home.
and that's my point. Very poorly made, very poorly constructed. Is we've still got our our government are still in opposition. They don't know that they spent 14 years in opposition. Keir Starmer, the leader of our government, flip flopped on all ideologies throughout that point in time. And don't forget, we used to back um, Corbyn. Corbyn.
Yeah, and he said he was
Yeah,
doing that because it's you backed the leader of your party at the time. Yeah.
well, you don't know, do you? If you've got if you've got any scruples or an integrity, then you stand by that. Like, all the things I might say about Corbyn, he always stood by his communist, convictions. He wouldn't have just supported Sir Keir Flannel because he was the leader of the party. In fact, he doesn't. He doesn't support him at all. He's no longer in the Labour Party. Keir got rid of him. So Keir, he always kind of kills himself with his own points. You listen to each week. He says something that, if you listen very carefully, takes takes away any of the validity of anything he said in the previous week. You've only got to look at his immigration policy. He went Enoch Powell last week, just out of nowhere. I don't know. I think he must have gone off script. He must have just thought, well, Donald Trump can do it. I'm just going to say what I like. And we have no idea we really have no idea what he stands for and where we're going with this, which is why populism
On the
is
immigration
becoming
thing, I was
important.
surprised that Kemi didn't say when Starmer's saying, "Well, like you backed this immigrate, you were there for this catastrophic immigration policy and you backed it." She could have said, "Well, you backed Corbyn." Maybe it's not the greatest of posts, but I just think the only way she can get out of it is sort of saying she was part of collective responsibility. But I don't think she's very convincing even on that because she did seem to kind of back it and think that we even needed more immigration. So yeah, did you find that because you watched PMQs? Did you find that Starmer was winning? Because a lot of people have said, because I said Kemi's the wrong choice, they should go with Jenrick, the Tories, but people are saying Starmer's actually beating her at PMQs. One idea
Well,
is like, oh, she'll smash him at PMQs, but apparently that's not been the case.
the reason that he'll always look like he's winning at the moment, the perception will always be, is because everybody behind him is on his side. As soon as he speaks, no matter what waffle he comes out with, it's just Pavlovian cheering behind him. Hooray! And
Right.
and and,
You know what
and
it's like,
whenever
though.
Kemi Badenoch's talking, we don't she doesn't get that similar sort of support. So
Right.
in terms of the theatrics and the pantomime of it, Keir Starmer always looks like he's doing better than anybody else in the room
It's a
because
great
he's
point.
got majority of the support.
They stacked the room because of they got all those ridiculous amount of seats. You're absolutely right. So they it looks like he's doing well. It's like just because we talked about comedy last week. It's like you start comedy, you do a comedy competition. One guy brings all their mates and
Yeah,
just fills the audience with their mates. And another thing that sprung to mind was Farage on that debate where they just got made sure there was no Farage fans in the entire BBC audience, and he kept making really good points just to absolute silence. So yeah, I can see it gives the impression he's doing better than he is.
it's a pantomime.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And
Okay. What just on this reform thing before we get off that with Nick Candy, which is what we're ostensibly talking about. One thing Farage says is he will give up his shares and democratize the party, which is interesting because that's what Ben Habib sort of left over. That was one of the main points. Wonder if Ben's regretting it, thinking, "Oh, now Nick Candy's in, now Farage is actually going to do this." So he did say he was going to actually do that finally. Do you worry that as reform? My worry is that as they get more serious and they get their funding that they are just going to be so watered down that it's not something that interests me. I mean, we talked about it before, but now with Nick Candy coming on board, if he was supporting Labour 10 minutes ago, and he was talking about growth, yes, and growth's important. He's saying how the budget was a catastrophe, but it's very much the emphasis on Thatcherite economics and growth, and we've got all these money guys in. But I do wonder if any kind of actual conservative type politics will get lost in that. Because as I've said, they're a liberal party. They're obsessed with Thatcherite economics. Rupert Lowe says all the right things, but I just wonder whether if the party's going to get more and more diluted in its message and just replace the Tories, but then just be the new Tories. And is there any point in that?
yeah, I mean, there's always a danger in politics when you've got huge donors that they can sway the politics in some way. But if you think about the character, I mean, yes, Nick Candy has joined and he's reportedly made a seven-figure donation, which makes it more than £1 million. I did finish school, and But I think his politics are probably aligned. Elon Musk, if he gives him 100 million quid or $100 million even, which is probably 78, 80 million pounds, um, that really does elevate them to a league that they're not in at the moment. But Elon Musk shares the politics as well of Nigel Farage. He sees him akin to what's happening with Trump in the States. So at the moment, I don't see that as an issue for them. One thing it will do is it will attract more and more people across from the Tories. I think Suella Braverman.
Yeah, her husband's just gone across. That's the other
Her
news.
husband's gone across. I'm actually a constituent of hers. So Waterlooville Fareham is my constituent, her constituency, and I live within that constituency. And it was rumoured locally after the general election.
That's what we do.
Hey, back to
You
the bants at the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, you don't get them anymore. Um,
Well, that's not as many. It's true.
so I think that would be a real coup in terms of she is could be considered a very senior Conservative MP. She certainly has played a large part of what's gone on in the last 5 years or so. If that was to happen and there was money across there and they grew and they grew and they grew, yeah, I can see it becoming more and more legitimate. What's demanded of them is going to be interesting. We covered this last week. It's going to. There's a huge void in British politics. Reform are being chosen to fill it, but it's trying perhaps to be all things to all men, and obviously that's where trouble lies. So they will have to stick to their core values. But there's some debate, continuous debate about what that is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No,
I
no
mean,
one knows
no.
because they don't have clear policies. So that's their big. That's the danger. Is they always just whatever Farage's latest whim is. What about the idea that Nick Candy was not really self-made? So some guy called Alfie Potts Harmer, whoever that is, writes unpopular opinion: if you were educated at a £50,000 a year private school and started your company with a £6,000 loan from your grandmother, as Nick Candy did, then you are not, in fact, self-made. And then other people have said that's ridiculous. That's
Did
still
you say
totally
six
self-made.
thousand?
6,000, and somebody was saying, well, it was 1995, so that's a
It
lot
doesn't
more.
matter. 6,000. If you turn, even if it was 1965, to turn 6,000 quid into a £1 billion property empire takes a little bit more than a really nice education.
I know.
And we've all met people, plenty of people who have had expensive educations and aren't anywhere near as successful or as wealthy as
Yeah.
Nick Candy. So, I mean, that's a bit of a moot point, really. If someone gave me £6,000 a day, I'm not sure I could turn it into billions of pounds within
No.
uh, 20,
Pe-
20 years.
People don't realize. I mean, it's incredibly hard to. I mean, it sounds a stupid statement. It's incredibly hard to become a billionaire. I mean, right? People. This is when Trump first was sort of running in 2015 and 16. I just remember all sorts of people commenting on the internet and oh, he just was given to him by his dad and he's done nothing. And I was always thought, just you've got no idea. Like the gulf between you and Trump is so immense. You're commenting on the internet, so in some way you imagine you're all the same, but you're not. If you looked at Trump's day, it would not resemble your day in any way. And I put
No.
myself in this, like Elon Musk. Oh, he's stupid or oh, he's an idiot. He does stupid posts. It's like he's running like four major companies and landing rockets and stuff. Like you've got no idea what Elon Musk's day or his brain is like, and it's not like yours. So have a bit of humility at least. The level of work and the level of brain power it takes to do some of these things. And even if you've got the brain power, are you doing the work? Most people aren't, and that's okay. It's like you don't all have to be billionaires, but this idea of this sort of like, oh, if I had 6 grand, it's easy. It's like, how many billionaires are there? I mean, like, how many? We You don't know anyone with 6 grand who hasn't become a billionaire. It's just completely absurd.
Well,
I just say it's ridiculous.
anybody, there was it, 6 grand in '96 is probably the equivalent of, let's say, at most £20,000 now. Most people could go and borrow from any lender tomorrow £20,000. So if it's easy, just if I were you, just go and borrow it tomorrow.
Yeah,
Start on your journey to becoming a billionaire,
yeah.
because it's that easy apparently. Unpopular point. What a way to start. sometimes people start tweets with like, and you think, oh, okay, this could be interesting, but it's always nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah,
Unpopular
unpopular
point.
opinion. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Dogs are shit. You're like, well, I
yeah.
guess that is
It's
unpopular.
it, he had so he couldn't choose. He couldn't choose which family he was born into. He couldn't choose which schools he went to. Yes, there is an advantage provided if you go to a £50,000 a year school. Just in the networking alone, the type of people you're associated with.
That's true. And I'd focus more on the school than the money because I mean, bit of money is, yeah, like you say, it's nothing. But the school, I mean, that does tie more into my personal bitterness. And yeah, those schools give you a huge advantage. There's no doubt. But
The
they don't give you
question
like a
is,
become a billionaire advantage. They give you just a sort of, you
yeah.
understand social convention better. You're better at getting along and brown nosing and networking and all those things. That's what I've noticed.
Also, I think he'd have been pretty upset. He'd he had £500,000 worth of education, and his nan gave him 6 grand. Like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do with that, nan? Turns out it's going to be a £1 billion property empire, and I'm sure he had lots of help along the way. Of course he did. Of course he did. The point is, he made it, and who
E-
cares?
Everybody needs good neighbors, Paul.
Yeah,
That's the
exactly,
bottom line here. He took that
absolutely.
to heart. So all right, well that's Nick Candy and reform. Let's see how that develops. It's somewhat interesting. Will Suella Braverman go to reform as well as the other story? But or
Yeah,
just her husband. That's moderately interesting story. But why don't we go across the pond and do an American story, which is massive. Well, there's two massive American stories,
yeah,
and one of them I'm sort of worried about what we're allowed to say about it. But one of them is sort of done because it's the Daniel Penny case, and he's completely won and been totally vindicated. For anyone that forgot, somehow Daniel Penny saved people on a subway in New York from this guy Jordan Neely, who was a homeless person who has some mental health issues, who was going and some drug issues, and was putting people's lives in danger and threatening people. And Penny, of course, stopped him, but he ended up dying. Although it looks like they were able to prove that it wasn't directly as a result of Penny's actions, or there was certainly doubt about that. And so he got off the manslaughter charge, but then he got off the secondary lesser charge. And now he's completely free and vindicated, and it's a great, great thing. And it's a very rare instance of justice. And there have been some attempts to claim that it's bad in some way, but they're just not convincing. I'll give you one of them. Hassan. Just imagine if Jordan Neely had been white and Daniel Penny was black. Imagine what some of the folks defending Penny today would be saying. Just imagine. And I don't think this stuff will work. And I've got a couple of reasons. One is we're in the MAGA era now. And that means that people of all races are kind of sick of the BLM narrative. Latino men are voting Trump, black men are even voting Trump, something like 19%. And people are just, I feel, generally sick of these victim narratives. Obviously, the Jussie Smollett thing, which was an absurd lie. But even George Floyd, it looks more and more absurd. And some people say maybe Derek Chauvin should even get another hearing because if you look at it, there was there was some evidence that that was actually a drug overdose. But the point is, people are sick of it on the one hand, and on the second point, actually, people's revealed preference, I think, is that they really hate getting accosted on the subway by nutters. If you've been on the tube, it's the same thing in London. I think deep down, even if you're a lib saying, "Oh, this is terrible," don't you deep down think, "But if I was on that subway, I would want someone like Daniel Penny to stop this nutter being in my face." It's just a very unsympathetic figure. Whereas George Floyd, they generated this narrative, even though he was also quite an unsympathetic figure. I just don't think it's working anymore for someone like Jordan Neely. I just think people are like, "Well, the guy was a violent person,
yeah. It hasn't
criminal on the subway."
worked
Yeah, it hasn't worked.
because it's not a big story over here. Really, it's not got traction in the same way. And we go right back to the point you made about that tweeter, that commentator, saying, "Imagine if it was the other way around." By the way, if it wasn't for people like her, I assumed it was a female from the name you said. We wouldn't be looking at the color of their skin anyway.
Who's the
We,
female?
we've
There's no female.
so who was the person who tweeted? Was it a guy?
Oh no, there's a guy called Mehdi Hassan. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I thought, sorry, I mistook that for a woman. Anyway, that's irrelevant. Anyway, the color of the skin is also irrelevant. No one's really looking at that. I mean, they do. We do now. We're programmed to because we've got every mainstream outlet telling us. Oh, I don't know if you've noticed, but that was a black person that was killed. Oh, and you might need to notice this as well. It was a white person that did the killing. Um, and we're told that's important in some way. It's entirely irrelevant. And you could hear people that have invested their whole careers in that argument panicking at that, really, because it's gradually going away. Nature's restoring us slightly, and thanks to the MAGA movement, really, and what we've seen in terms of uh, the way people have voted in the latest US election. But going back to what happened, yeah, you on the chip. Okay, so sadly, what was the chap's name? Jordan Neely was the poor chap that died. Right. Sadly, he had a mental illness. Apparently, by the way, his mother. This started some 15 years ago when his mother was strangled, and in the words of the BBC article I read, stuffed into a suitcase. I'm not sure quite what went on there, but whatever it was absolutely harrowing for this Neely character, and that set him onto this journey that he found himself on. He was homeless, Michael Jackson impersonator. I mean, that's a red flag. And of course, on the tube, you you do see these things happen, and you see people talking to themselves. You see people shouting. This guy was shouting. This guy was screaming. This guy was demanding money. This is anecdotally from what I've read from eyewitnesses, and saying he wanted to go back to prison. I don't know if he'd ever been to prison, but maybe that was some way of scaring people. And Daniel Penny was someone who essentially apprehended, put him in a chokehold, apprehended Neely, and I assume did so until the police arrived. But as such, subsequently, Neely passed away. Maybe not as a result, but obviously that would have been quite impactful. So what we end up with is this situation, really unfortunate situation, where you've got sort of a form of vigilante justice. You've got someone who is. We've all been there, by the way. I don't know if you've ever been on a train. Once I was on a train about this time of year. I was coming back from a gig, but at this time of year, what you'll notice is office workers are also coming back on those late trains as well because they're staying up for a drink. And this guy was really being quite abusive towards the woman sat opposite us. And no one was saying anything. I just, fuck it. I said, come on, mate, that'll do you. You've made your point. You're bullying her now. Try to put on some sort of alpha tone. And he turned on me, and absolutely nobody, and by the way, everybody before this was against him. Absolutely nobody came to defend me in any way, shape, or form. Of course, I didn't expect them to. But I find myself in a situation now where I'm having this confrontation with a drunk man who's been abusive towards a woman. The woman who sat next to me is absolutely saying nothing either. Subsequently, she did later because it basically ended up with him walking away and me saying, just go away, mate. And he did go away, fortunately, because I didn't back down. But I was never too sure how that was going to turn out. But nobody came to my support whatsoever. They just saw a disagreement and thought, I'm staying out of it. Okay. And the only reason I got involved is because the lady next to me was being abused by this drunk guy. And he deliberately targeted her because she was a woman and because he saw her as weaker than himself. But
Wow.
what,
And what I'm learning
what
there,
that,
Paul, is you are the Britain's Daniel Penny. You are the hero.
well, I didn't do any choke holding, I basically we're comedians. I also host a lot of shows, so I'm used to talking to people. I relied essentially on being quick witted. Not in it, I wasn't trying to crack jokes. I wasn't asking what he did for a living and taking the piss out of his name. But what I
Have you
was
used
able
many
to
women on
talk.
trains often, sir? Is this normal for you?
Yeah, exactly. So I talked him through it. I said, what if this was your daughter, wife, or mother on a train? I was saying things like that, and someone was speaking to them the way you're speaking to this lady. And it was at first it was kind of angering him more, but then the more I pursued that point, the more he sort of started to realised that the moral argument was being lost, irrespective of anything else. And he wasn't, he was just a drunk guy. He wasn't. He didn't look like someone who did a lot of fighting. I don't know. That might have been another matter. But my point is, people don't stick up for other people. We don't have this community sense. So this Penny character has essentially stuck up for people. It's an absolutely thankless task. Who knows what this Neely guy was going to do? All you can judge is what you're presented with, which is this unfortunately mentally ill character shouting and screaming at people on the train, demanding money, saying he wants to go back to prison. So Penny has apprehended him. He's essentially saved anybody from getting damaged at all, and he's found himself, very nearly found himself in prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Fortunately, and I believe it's fortunate, he hasn't, because or we just end up in a society where you can't look after anybody.
Well, that's exactly it. And I said, great news. This man deserves a medal, and it'd be good to see if Trump does come up with something for him. You can't have a society where heroes are punished and violent criminals are lauded as saints. And I've said similar points about this Penny case many times. Unfortunately, the appalling treatment of Penny has already ensured that many men will never risk destroying their own lives for others again. So I made the same point. I've seen loads of posts like that, like saying, sorry, we're out. And you see women, people have shared these things from women posting like, oh no, I was in a thing today, no one stepped in, why does no one step in? And the same, then the people find a tweet where they praise Jordan Neely and attack Danny Penny. It's like, because of that, you fucking
Yeah.
idiot. So it's like, people don't understand. It's like, well, a lot of people do understand, some people don't. You can't have a society like that. As you say, we're now in this low trust society, no one wants to help anyone. And that's how we are now. I mean, even me in London, it's an edgy place now. I got back at 1 a.m. from work, as we tend to, and someone would just approach me but just a young youth approaching me, asking for like I think he was a delivery person lost, trying to find a different house, but he's
Yeah.
coming up to me quite fast at 1 a.m. I was like, what? And I'm just like walking up to my stairs, going, maybe I'll shout the directions at you from next to my door. But in another era, you can just talk to people. But in an era where no one knows each other, we're all from different cultures and backgrounds. It's 1 a.m. and you come up to me. It's like, nah, bro, I'm getting this is not happening. And it's like I did any sort of trying to help him from my door, but I was like, I just walked literally away from it. He was walking towards me. Well, it's you would though, wouldn't you? It's 1 a.m. It's
Oh
London.
yeah. Well, yeah.
But that's just one example that's sprung to mind. There's loads of examples. You can't help anymore. Last question: would you help? You would, Paul, because you're a hero. What did the woman say when he walked away?
So there have been times where I haven't helped. I think I'm trying to think of something. What you were saying that anecdote. There would have been times where it is just sometimes. I can't
Well,
think of
that
one, but
wasn't about helping. That was about the low trust society and like you don't trust
yeah.
anyone
So
because the guy
I
actually
did
did just
help on
want
this
directions.
occasion.
Go on.
The woman that was being abused didn't say anything. Not until he'd gone, because he almost went immediately. He actually went to another carriage, unbeknownst to me, because he came when he got off the train. He made a point of coming past my carriage to say something. But what he didn't realise is we were both getting off at the same carriage. So when he came past my seat to say something, I got up to walk, and he sort of sped up and got away. And I'm like, I'm just getting off the train, man. At this point, the fear had kind of gone because I saw that he seemed to be more concerned about me than I was about him. But it wasn't until we were in a fairly empty carriage the woman actually plucked up the courage to say to me, "Thank you for that." She almost didn't want to do it in front of others. Um, and I don't know what that was about. I wasn't like aggressive. I didn't stand up and say, I'm gonna kill you and all your family. I
That
didn't.
would have been good.
I just used words. I just tried to calm the situation, point out the error of his ways, and basically tell him to go away. Um, and not even swearing. Oh, that was it. That you just reminded me of something. So behind me was a family with two children, and the dad of the family didn't know what was going on and leant over to me and went, "Mate, come on, we've got our children with us here." Anyway, I just went, "Okay, no worries." So I'm trying.
Well, he
But
said
you're
that
in the
to
middle of this.
you.
Yes,
He's telling you
because he
off.
doesn't know what's gone on. This is the other problem, the secondary issue. The dad, the other hero in this situation, he believes, is the dad who's saying to me, "Come on, mate, I think I might have sworn or something like that." And uh,
You've
and I
got a
just
problem with
went, "Yep,
swearing, Paul.
sorry,
That's
I
what
do
I'm
have a
hearing.
problem with swearing." So I kind of apologised to him, thinking very quickly in the moment, I can't run this past him. So I went, "Yep, sorry." And at that point, the guy was leaving anyway. And it wasn't until later on when things calmed down, I said, "Look, this was this." I turned around to the father of the family and said, "This was the situation." He said, "Yeah, we gleaned that in the end. Sorry, mate. It's just our children were getting scared." And I said, "Well, I feel terrible for that, and I'm sorry that they had to witness that." So I have still no idea to this. I feel like it was the right thing to do. He stopped. He stopped abusing this lady. He was drunk. Um, he was like putting his feet up on the seat next to her and stuff like that. It was
Ugh.
weird. It was aggressive,
Yeah, yeah.
sexually aggressive to some degree. Anyway, so not a lot of
That's gross.
thanks. Felt entirely isolated, and actually got told off by the father of family behind me because I'd sworn in front of his
Thankless
kids.
task. Yeah, I
Yeah, just
mean,
so my advice is, I don't know. You just, what do you do?
no, you did the right thing,
You
Paul.
can't shy away. You can't shy away. You have to. If you see if you can prevent something from happening, then it has to be the right thing to do, doesn't it?
Well, if you'd have started with the feet thing, I'd have been totally with you. Feet on the seat. Obviously, I don't care about women, but feet on the seat is where I'm like, that's disgusting.
So
But
her feet was not on the seat; his feet were.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't care about people abusing women on trains, but I care about them
Oh
putting
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
feet on the seat. The joke was I'm a misogynist. That's nearly always the joke. If in doubt, assume that's the joke. No, well, you say you should help Paul, but then people help and they get thrown in prison. So we're in this anarcho tyranny society now that will always back the criminal. Now we found out in this rare case in America where it was such a clear cut case they didn't, but they so often will. I mean, even Derek Chauvin, does he deserve to be stabbed in jail for doing his job? I don't know. And then there was drugs involved, and it wasn't even clear that he murdered him. It's a very controversial example, but in general, we have this problem of siding with the criminal. Just for these anecdotes, the only one I can think of similar is where I helped my mate in a fight in Newcastle, and the only thing that springs to mind is that it was similar in that these lads end up beating him, and there's all these. Anyway, he got into this fight, and there was these. It was him and some blokes against loads of they call them chavs in Newcastle, which is basically chavs. And then the lads helping my mate just left. They got in a car, and so there was just him against all them. He'd got himself in this fight. Basically, a guy asked for a tab, which is a cigarette in Newcastle. He said, "You got a tab, mate?" My mate told him where to go. Then the kid goes off. He comes back with a 2x4 plank of wood, and we were like, "Oh, that's not good." But then these other lads drive up, and they got out, and they say, "Oh, I hate Chavas." So they started going for the kid, and then my mate's getting involved. But then loads more of the kids' mates came out. Then the lads that were helping my mate drove off. Never get in a fight with people you don't know. This was years ago. And then
Yeah.
so they're all pummeling my mate in the corner, and going, "Well, I don't really want to be involved in this, but." Because he's sort of brought it on himself, but he's my mate, so I have to be. So I'm just looking around, going, yeah, anyone and those people are going, hey, come on, and they're but they're not doing anything. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna have to jump in. So I had to jump in with a flying kick. I don't know how flying it was. In my mind, it was a flying kick.
Yeah, in your
Then
mind,
kicked one of
who
these kids,
knows?
chucked one of them out the way, got punched in the face myself, and created basically enough of a diversion that we got out there because there was so many of them by then. There was just like the little dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. They weren't massive, but there were just so many of them. They were pummeling my mate had gone on the ground. They were pummeling. So it was pretty bad. But I
Yeah,
jumped
it
in
can
and
be
got punched
dangerous.
and got out. And that's the one time I was like, oh, good, I'm not a coward because I did jump in. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I did do it. And luckily, I've never had to face another similar situation since. So that's the last time I was tested, and it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's what do you do? I think we probably teach our children not to. Don't get involved if you don't have to. It's just safer not to, isn't it? But I don't
They don't
regret
make
that. But
heroes like you and me anymore, Paul.
yeah, no,
We're
they
men of
don't.
an
But
older order. Different values.
I'm trying not to really engage in that point because I think about the gentleman now, and I would, this is probably only about 4 years ago. So I would have been, I'm 45 now, 40, 41, and he would have been about 50. But he was an office working type guy, um, who just had an air of arrogance about him. But he didn't. I'm also someone who has seen actual hard people, and I could recognise he didn't fall into that category, which meant you just never know. That's the other point. You just don't know anyway. And one thing you don't know these days, you can't judge a book by its cover. You also don't know what they're carrying.
Yeah.
So when I was walking back to my car after I got off the train, I was thinking, well, it could have been anything. He could be hanging around here now. He could have a weapon of some kind, and that's kind of. It feels like that's a new thing in the last 10 to 20 years. People carrying weapons. So you just don't know, which is probably why Daniel Penny held on to Jordan Neely as long as he did, because he knew or he suspected that if he let go, all hell was going to break loose.
Yeah, that is true. When I got my phone robbed just by two lads on a moped in London a couple of years ago, I was like, my thought was go after them. They slowed down a bit in front of me. I was like, right, chase after them. Then my brain went knives, acid. You just go like,
It's
no,
not
it's not
worth it.
worth it.
It's
Not
not
worth it.
worth
No,
it.
but that's different because no one else was involved. That was just like a phone. But yeah, it's interesting. Do you get involved? Honor says you have to, but the society now will punish you because we're in this. I keep saying anarcho tyranny just because it is a society we're in. It punishes the heroes or innocent, and it rewards criminals. And it almost happened with Daniel Penny. He shouldn't have had to go through any of the trial or anything, but at least he's won. So that's something. I mean,
Yes.
this awful organization, NAACP, said the acquittal of Daniel Penny in the death of Jordan Neely has effectively given license for vigilante justice to be waged on the black community without consequence. It's a painful reminder of the inequities in our justice system. Jordan deserved compassion. Instead, he was met with violence. We stand with his family in calling for accountability. It's like, what a deranged take. It's like, yes, there's going to be a just vigilante justice now against black people. There's going to be all kinds of white supremacist Batmans on the street. It's complete fantasy.
Yeah, and by the way, this took place in New York, I believe. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is a Democrat stronghold. A lot of their local government is captured by ideology. It's remarkable that Daniel Penny was able to get off, really.
It's incredible. Yeah,
So,
nature's healing, as you say. Hopefully,
let's not forget that it is not like it happened in a fully Republican state with fully Republican views. This happened in the middle of New York City, where people like Jordan Neely are very well protected, irrespective of mental health issues, irrespective of their danger to society. They are well protected by the legal system. That's not to undermine any of his problems. I'm trying not to do that as part of this discussion because I don't know too much, but he wasn't a well man, and we've all seen it. So uh,
yeah.
no one deserves to die, but if you're gonna threaten people and try and attack people, then you're going to put yourself in danger of that sort of outcome.
I've got a really controversial point. My friend said to me, it's a bit like maybe a bit like the OJ trial with some of the things people are saying, and I think it's a little different. I was like, OJ, it was kind of absurd, but and obviously it was a racial thing. But there was people basically loved OJ. Obviously, the prosecution did a bad job and the defense did a better job, but also he was a beloved figure. But also, he killed, and this is a really dark thing, but he killed like a rich white woman who lots of people don't like, probably even rich white men who are divorced. I just think there's like a dark thing going on here where people deep down, as I've said, don't want to be accosted by someone on the subway. So deep down, do they really have much sympathy with Jordan? I think they kind of don't. Whereas in the OJ case, I think even though the murders were disgusting when you think about it, there's all this spectacle and sensation around it where he's writing books like "What if I did it?" and he's this kind of comic figure, and it's quite hard for you to keep in mind like these grisly murders, and you can kind of get swept along with thinking, "Oh, OJ's all right," really, stuff like that, and the black community, like he's our guy. Whereas in this case, I don't really think there is that. Like I said, we're in a different moment. People are fatigued about the George Floyd stuff,
No,
and
it's
I
been
also just think,
capitalised upon by Black Lives Matter. I saw, the trouble was the weather was a bit rainy and it's dark and cold and stuff, and they thought better of it after a while. But this, look, I'm avoiding mentioning skin color on this story because it's totally and utterly irrelevant.
yeah, but they're
If you
trying
have
to
to,
make it a thing, but I'm saying it's not gonna catch on
yeah,
this time.
no, and you're absolutely right.
I
I
think
was aware. It's just this is not about a white man attacking a black man. That wasn't what he was thinking. Simple as that. So what?
no, he certainly wasn't. He was a former Marine trying to defend people, and of, and he seems like a really cool guy. He's there saying, "I didn't want any of this attention. I really don't like this." And he just said, "I've just he doesn't like the media attention. He doesn't want any of this. He just didn't want. He just couldn't have lived with himself if anyone had been hurt." And he said he'll take all the aggro and stress over someone getting hurt. So the guy's just like a rare thing, which is a genuine hero. That's just what he is.
Well, he's certainly taken a lot of aggro and stress. So fair play to him. I'm sorry that Mr. Neely has lost his life, but we have to have a society where we we all feel safe to live in. And what that requires is people looking out for one another. And the anomaly in that particular case was a homeless, mentally ill man shouting at people on a train. Okay, unpredictable, potentially dangerous, and quite scary. There were children being shielded in this particular instance as well. So look, that is what we can't accept in a safe community or a safe society. So I'm afraid that the lesson is we need to do more to help our mentally unwell people, and we need to come together more as a community and make very precise decisions about what is and what is not acceptable about behaviour, irrespective of colour of skin or country of birth or whatever religion or whatever floats your boat.
Okay, well, let's get on to the Luigi Mangione story, which has some
Luigi
similarities in a way,
Mangione.
but you know what? We'll do it after the we'll do it on the paid section
Yeah,
on the nickdixon.net. So go to the nickdixon.net for the full thing. You get all my full podcast with all kinds of guests like Carl Benjamin, academic agent, and Paul Cox. And it's £5 a month. So that'll be on nickdixon.net. And we'll say goodbye to YouTube and the audio. Although last time I messed it up because I was so tired and the audio got the paid one. So that's a bonus for you. But I've changed it back now. And Paul, people can find you at Paul Cox Comedy.
that's correct. Everywhere at Paul Cox Comedy. Come and find me. Give me a follow. Say hello.
Say hello to Paul if you like 90s references and things that were different in the 90s from how
Curly
they are
hair.
now.
That's back at the moment.
Yeah, that's what he does. That's what he offers. All right, and I'm amazed we only got two stories so far, but we always do that. Two stories seems to be about the right for YouTube and the audio. But go to nickdixon.net for the rest. Otherwise, we'll see you again next week.